If you got the dime, I got the time, and I'll sell it to you all for free 99. What's good, my hairless minks of the Blue Sea? How are y'all been doing? I know it's been a minute, like the uncle who only shows up on holidays. I apologize, but everybody's life schedule has been off the rails lately, and I haven't been able to really edit the way I want to. So when I can't edit, which my editing is trash to begin with. Um, I kind of don't be wanting to post. Like I have recorded audio, but I don't know. It's just different. The editing part is fun. It's just the time consumption hasn't fit my schedule lately. But I wanted to talk today because I ain't talked to y'all in a minute. How y'all been doing? Staying safe out there? Enjoying NBA playoffs. Football will be back. Baseball. And we got hockey playoffs, all of that good stuff. But it's a Friday and we got a One Piece chapter, man. 989 dropped. And I just been hyped because it opened so many paths. And I just want to talk about a few things, actually. Um, just based on this chapter because we got some lore. Remember lore? That used to be a thing. And we kind of fell away from that for a little bit. But we're back to some important lore that um, Big Mamu slash Big Mimu, whatever you want to call her at this point, um, actually brings up. So first off, if you can, support the Viz. If you can't, just do it with your praise. Sometimes word of mouth is just as good as that $2 a month. But especially now, everybody ain't got it. And don't judge nobody for what they ain't got because you don't know when that could be you, right? I'm pretty sure we've all been there. It is what it is. But stick with the positivity and you get there. And now after how many chapters? I don't know. We got like Scottie Pippen's number of chapters of this pound thing, and man, I like pounding, but I'm tired of pound. And like I said before, we can go back to Columbus folding clothes. I understand, keeping up with your kids. This was the first cover out of him that actually was appealing in a sense of what it was trying to convey. I just don't think it should have took this many chapters to do it. It's just I don't know, but it is what it is, right? We start off as usual with um, how do I want to put this? Actually, you know what? Let me get the two things out the way that I think is probably on a lot of people's minds, and I'm sure you want to know what my take is or whatever, whatever. I'm gonna start with Yamato. Okay, gags are gags, and I do realize comedy doesn't always translate word for word, just like languages don't. So there might be some statements that she makes that, like this one in this chapter, saying, "Hey, I'm your dad." Uh, I don't know if that was supposed to be a joke. I don't know. I'm not sure, but it's just getting old already. And this series is time and time again focused on people being themselves. So I understand her Yamato's intent, but at the same time, from Momo's standpoint, hey man, my pops just died a couple of months ago, and you want to run up on me telling me you're him, you're gonna have a problem, right? Same thing with Pound. I guess that's those somewhat are parallel in that aspect. It's just that Yamala's kind of taking it too far. And at some point, it'll be addressed. Because it's one thing to do this with Momo, right? But what about Hiyori? You get what I mean? And at some point, I think all three of them will sit down and have some type of conversation because Yamato has Odin's journal, which will probably go to them, I'm guessing. Maybe that's why Yamato's kept it so long to actually give to them. And for everything that Momo's already been through, it's just like, well, like I said, I've time traveled. So Momo does have some concept of things that don't make sense in the natural world based on the fact that Momo has done something that no other character in the series have done. Time traveled, and on top of that, knew Roger, and on top of that, the connection with Zonisha, which I think will come into a play again because this seems to be a voice of all things area of ability or connection, and we know the people of Wano, specifically the Kazuki, will be tied to everything in the plot going forward because of the poneglyphs. Just does that alone, right? And Wano is the most important country we've seen so far that needs liberation. One, because of its resources. I'm assuming Sea Stone being one of them, and the other thing because of the bloodline of the Kozuki. Okay, we don't have any fake poneglyphs yet. We don't have any people or we don't have any technology or people claiming to be able to read the poneglyphs yet, with the exception of Robin, right? And not only that, Momo has ties to Vegapunk, which things are brought up later in the chapter that tie back to Vegapunk, which we think Vegapunk's fruit might have something to do. I mean, Momo's fruit might have something to do with experimentation done to Kaido if he's actually a dragon and actually has a fruit to begin with, right? There's so many theories on that it'll make your head spin. But Vegapunk ties up some loose ends. So it is important for some of these issues to be resolved and talked about because then the rest of the story is not going to make any sense. You know what I mean? And that's just not how things have been done. So I do believe that the Yamato gag will stop at some point enough for them to have a conversation at least, especially because Luffy is present and has an idea on what's going on, right? So I like Momo. And then on top of that, right? He just went through that deal with Kaido and accepting his bloodline, being proud of his name and wanting to be great. And, that's a lot of burden. He's only 8, you know. And I do think him having the fruit will come into play at some point. We just don't know when, right? And it's supposedly the only perfect copy of a fruit that exists. And only one man can do that. Now we're aware of, and that's Dr. Vegapunk, which also includes Gangster Gastino and top 5 dead or alive Judge Vince Smoke. So the nature or biological manipulation in the series will come to play again because we got what this chapter? Big Mom talking about giantification because of the numbers. Now, how Big Mom knows that they're failed experiments straight from Punk Hazard, I have no idea, but it's Big Mom. I remember because I think I started reading right around Punk Hazard in real lifetime. Punk Hazard in the manga is around the time I started reading. It was either between them and Dressrosa, so that was that was some years ago. But I do remember this was before there really was a big YouTube community and all that. Like before I even knew people did videos, people had been, or I had noticed, and a few others, that panel when they showed the door on Punk Hazard. Why was there a world government symbol and the symbol that we thought stood for Kaido? Now we found out later the beast pirate symbol or whatever doesn't look the same. So everything doesn't line up. But now we find out that Kaido's numbers came directly from Punk Hazard. So once again, now we see interactions between the Gorosei and Yonko because there's no way that Kaido just went to Punk Hazard without the world government knowing. I have to assume that if Vegapunk's lab was there, it was a very watched place. Now I know Frankie got in there and did what he did, which he too has ties to Vegapunk. A lot of stuff in this chapter has to do with Vegapunk, if you noticed. And I don't want to speculate on what chapter because of the whole chapter 1000 thing, but I don't with how many weeks we have left in the year, I don't think it's going to be this year. Because there was another time, there was a number chapter we were all waiting on, thinking it was something. And I remember it didn't come out until late January. It was like 4 years ago, I think. I have to look back and see exactly what chapter I'm talking about. But this has happened before. Um, we know he messes with the numbers, no pun intended. But there's no way Vegapunk doesn't get brought up. So between Momo, Frankie, Vegapunk. Then you have the ancient weapons, which Frankie had access to Pluton's blueprints, and clearly he's done stuff already with Vegapunk's workings because of Wapple metal, which is what the pacifistas are made out of, which is what he makes his. I'm assuming that's what his metal parts of his body and everything, his cyborgness, that has to all be Wapple metal. I wouldn't see why he wouldn't. It seems to be besides sea stone and diamond or something. Physically it's the strongest material in the series. That's not an ability, just an actual material. And the poneglyphs, those three. That's it. So To me, that says like these things have to be tied up in a way, and then now we got giantification. Well, we know that top five dead or alive judges Vince Smoke, Gangster Agostino, and Dr. Vegapunk all worked together at some time. We found that out last arc, right? So all these loose ends are starting to come together and form something. And to the point, remember, Big Mom has always wanted giants. That's what she wanted and she couldn't get. Okay. Even though she clapped them all when she was a kid, I doubt she even remembers any of that. All she knows is that they're the strongest race, supposedly, even though so far in the series, every oversized animal or creature, with the exception of Big Mom and Kaido, have been fodderized. The giants that we've seen so far have been, I don't want to call them fodder, but they haven't been a force to be reckoned with. And if we know Loki exists, and however that can go with Elbaf and stuff like that, but up until this point, they've been irrelevant. Um, I'm sure there's a reason for that, especially because if you look at Onigashima itself, that was a living creature. And then, the continent pullers and all the theories and stuff that falls behind that. Even back going to, it was something I noticed. I remember Joy Boy did a video on, he was talking about like what the world government is planning to do as far as eradication, killing everybody, or, similar to whatever that big hole near in his lobby, the water that just goes straight down, similar to something like that. I remember him bringing up a bridge, and then I was thinking back, like, oh, you know what? That kind of makes sense because I remember even not talking to him. I don't mean like on some cap stuff like that, but I remember commenting about that specifically because when they went back to Reverie, when Garp, Shirahoshi, and the rest of them were going up to Mary Joie, there's this long staircase, and it's Shirahoshi is like around 40 feet, I think, 12, 13 meters, 14 meters tall, something like that. These statues made her look like an ant in comparison to size and scale. So it did, like, I was like, oh, it's one of those things that just clicked, like, oh, you know what? This might be a real thing. So these giants actually there's the bigger versions of the giants that we've seen. Because if Onigashima makes Kaido look like an ant, that creature had to exist at one time. And remember, they found the giants in ice, and then the whole Punk Hazard thing. So all this stuff is tying back together, and Big Mom's interest in it just makes it even more valid to me that I really do think that we're getting Vegapunk soon. So that's why this chapter, even though it was more about setting up fight and stuff like that, the open world um, paths because of the lore became a little bit more clear, at least to me in this chapter, just based on her one statement. Oh, those are the failed experiments from Punk Hazard. That's just that one statement. And I just, flashbacks to Punk Hazard. And it's just like, yes, the kids. And then, that ties in Chopper now um, because of how mad he was about that whole situation and experimenting on these kids and, Gangster Gastino, wherever he is now, by the way. Um, and then the fact that we think that Dr. Vegapunk is basically being held by the government. Whether you think he's a good person or bad person, he's clearly under someone else's control. And one of the reasons why I think that we can come to that conclusion has to do with the time skip. Because had he not let Kuma take that last order to protect the Straw Hats, um, we wouldn't have got time skip because they just would have died at Sabaody. So, it's just one of those things like even back in the day, I don't know nothing about Star Wars, but I know what Order 66 is because that's been a theory once again. I was one of those that's been around before even the YouTube community was. So it, after waiting almost a decade for this, it's like we're almost there. And to me, it's just like the world building is what I like the most besides the characters. I love the fighting and all that, but the world building, just seeing a world, all the strings, no Ito, Ito, no me, come together, it just makes everything a lot greater. And you appreciate the little stuff, like even this. And then, like I said, with Momo, he's an important bloodline. From an important people with important abilities. the people who wrote the only history that we're aware of. And I have to assume that even the Gorosei have been interested in this, which a lot of people, including myself, assume they have some poneglyph that's why they're not as threatened by certain things, because it's like, well, we got the ones that everybody needs, and you have to come here to get it. And for as strong as everybody is, nobody's ran up on Marriage Wall yet, with the exception of, the revolutionaries. But that wasn't until this point. Until then, they've gone unchecked, unchallenged. And like I said, it's going to draw in a lot of things, because even with the celestial dragons, right? They wear what? Space helmets. Okay, we know the moon is a thing, and L's already been there. We know space pirates are a thing. We've seen the Skypean and the Birkins and the Shandorians. We've seen their hieroglyphics drawn on the cave on the moon, not even a part of the planet. And then even the empty throne itself, right? The instant messenger Sama sits on. The empty throne has stars on it. That was the first thing I noticed, was the fact that it had stars. And then the fact that they say it's the direct center of the planet, which I'm sure has some importance, either navigationally because of sea and how the moon affects tides and all that other crazy science stuff that I'm not going to bore you with. But I'm sure there's a reason why. It's not just symbolism because they think they're the center of the world. There's probably a unique property to that physical location being there. I'm sure of it. So we're going to get to that too. And like even SSG, right? Man, this is supposed to be a chapter review. It's sounding like a Vegapunk video, but he really does tie into everything. I thought more about him, I won't say, than anything in this chapter, because all this stuff we've been thinking about, right? We knew Sanji and Zoro were gonna fight either King or Queen or Jack. Like we knew all this stuff. We knew they're gonna go fight Kaido. That wasn't really like we knew. I didn't know Bill Mom was gonna get trolled again, but it's not that surprising. Like once again, taking zero damage other than her ego. Nothing about her ever gets hurt but her ego. That's about it. And then even King, right? When Luffy and Zoro ran into each other, which I think Zoro must have got lost again, which that's part of the course. Because it's like, dude, you was just downstairs with Kid fighting scrubs. How did you end up upstairs, like on the fourth floor, and then Queen just happened to be on the same floor? Like, what were you doing, man? Like, what was he finna do? I do like Queen unlocked his defender badge from 2K this chapter with the defender badge and the chase down LeBron block, because Luffy thought he was just gonna just straight to the top. Queen was like, nah, I'm gonna take a bite out of it. Queen used crunch. It's not very effective. That was a go panel though. We got Boss Jinbei and Robin and even Usopp and Nami look kind of boss. Even though they're in the background, they still found a way to shine. Brook on the Creek. We got Shogun. Oh yeah. Man, I almost forgot about Frankie, which once again ties into Vegapunk. Like his direct, I don't want to call him his direct successor, but that's who he studies his work. And then once again, this SSG thing, I feel like Frankie, whatever the SSG is, if it's not modified humans, the only other thing I've said before that I think that it sounds crazy, right? Like if you say what I'm thinking, the only threat I could see upgraded pacifists actually having is if they found a way to access haki, or at least jam somebody else's haki. Because for them to be a threat to top tiers, you can't use inanimate objects that don't have haki. That sounds like a bad plan and a waste of money and time. So I do feel like they're either modified people, like we have with the Germa, something of that nature, giantification, something like that, because we've seen it brought up by Big Mom this chapter, and that's the race she's been chasing her whole life, even to the point where she tried to marry off Lola to Loki, and that failed. Um, is brought up again. And then with whatever you think about Kaido, if he's even human or a dragon who ate it, is he a person who ate a Hito Hito no Mi, model Oni? Is he a dragon that ate a fruit? Does he not have a fruit at all? I mean, we can go on and on, right? But Yamato's horns are still there, so there might be something to that, and he's just a different race or something, which would make sense, right? And then even another different race we've seen with King. King pops up with some. Either these are just some very lucky gifters who all had the same fruit, and they'd all succeeded, or this is some other race. Now the shading on one of them, if you look to the right, but that might be a perception thing. Like that character is way farther back compared to the other ones. That's why they're just shaded like that. Or it has black feathers or wings similar to what we've seen King in his human quote unquote form. I don't know what's going on that. Either that or they just reminded me of Monet, honestly. Like maybe there's its own version of Monet's fruit or something like that. Because some of these fruits do seem to cross over, right, between Paramecia and Logi and Zoe, and some of them have crossovers in a sense. Whew, man, there's a lot of crazy stuff. I wanted to talk because I couldn't wait, and I'm probably gonna go in depth some more, with some good panels and stuff with Vegapunk because there's some stuff throughout the series that has been leading to him in the first place. So it's not like this Vegapunk stuff is coming out of nowhere, coming from me. Okay, don't get me wrong, this chapter was hype as far as like the fights coming up, but like I said, some of the stuff we've been thinking about this for a long time. So it wasn't really nothing new. It was just like, okay, I just enjoyed it because we were finally getting it. But the little things in every chapter is what I tend to focus more on because I just think they're more important to the overall story. And, with Momo, especially the journal, Vegapunk, like I said, all that stuff is going to tie together for later. Is Momo going to learn this ability that supposedly it can only be passed down? Can Robin actually teach somebody else how to read poneglyphs? She can't inscribe them because the technique maybe is only passed down, but reading it maybe it can be taught because Robin learned. So clearly somebody else can learn, or is this like some KK, what is it, KK Genkai stuff, like some bloodline limit stuff from Naruto or something, as far as reading a poneglyph and not being Kazuki. Because one thing that tripped me out about Orochi, right? He didn't seem to have any interest in the poneglyphs whatsoever. And I know he had to be aware of what they are. I just never understood why during his villain tyrant being a tyrant, he never seemed to have any interest in the poneglyphs for whatever reason, even though Kaido has one that we assume is in Wano. But it's never brought up. I don't know if that's one of those things that just got left out, or is it going to come up because Orochi/Kanjuro might not be dead or something like that? But it always bothered me that Orochi never brings up the poneglyphs at all for somebody who wants power. Like, and he knows that the government is interested in Wano. So it's just like, it's kind of weird to me that that's never been a thing since his backstory has been brought up, even in the flashback. We even got fruits. Like, we even know now where previous fruits were, like Mr. Two's fruit and Barto's fruit. So we got stuff from the past, and we kind of still didn't really get anything. Even with Toki, it's like, how do you have somebody? I understand now more, like, while some of them interviews they were talking about, I don't want to spoil too much because just the existence of Toki could pretty much spoil the rest of the series easily. I'm sure it could, especially because we know about God's Valley, all these big important, like chapter 957 was a huge chapter, as far as the world building and then the lore going to the end of the series. And even with the Marines pretending that they're not interested in Wano, like I've said before, with Akainu specifically, his reluctance to go to Wano seemed similar to if you read Vinland Saga. I don't think, obviously, it's not for the same reasons, but his reaction to things about Wano seemed similar to me as Askeladd when he didn't. I'm not gonna spoil it for nobody, but it just reminded me of a moment with Askeladd. So, and then even going back to the cover of what was it, 592, the chapter with that brought people to speculate if Akainu was in Sword or not. I even brought it up in the old video. That was one of the first videos I did. I brought it up that That cover chapter, their location, if you look at the structures of the buildings, I even put them side by side so you could see the structure of the buildings and the coloring is exactly the same as the chapter back in Shimosuke Village when Zoro's master um, Koshiro was looking at Zoro's bounty poster, the one where all the little kids were practicing Santo Ryu. Their buildings were colored the exact same way in the colorized version, which is one of the reasons why I think people kind of might actually be a part of Sword. But kind of was a kid, his kid picture, he has a sword on his shirt. So it's like one of those things that keep tying people back to Wano. Like Wano is just it's almost as important as Mary Joie or Fisherman Island at this point. Those seem like to be the three most important locations in the series. Until we find out when, where, and if God's Valley is still existent, similar to the Laugh situation. So this chapter to me, even though we got a lot of um, action, not action like actual action, but precursors to things that'll be all action, it opened up a lot of paths as far as like what's next. Because clearly, if you have Frankie, Momo, and where's Law for that matter? Speaking of suspect sword situations, where's Law? Where is he at? Where's Hawkins? Where's X Drake? We have an idea on where the Flying Six are, with the exception of Black Maria. We know Sasaki's got the handcuff treatment. He's handcuffed to a post somewhere, chilling. Who's Who was in proximity to Yamato because they ran into Yamato um, right before the situation with Momo and all of that. So Who's Who is in the vicinity somewhere. We know where Ulti and Pepe were. They like the only one that's not accounted for is X Drake, and to a lesser extent Hawkins, and then Law helped the Scabbards and then dipped out to go do who knows what. But Law is the ultimate strategist so far. He's the cause of all of this. Since Punk Hazard, wow, another callback to Punk Hazard. Like I said, it's this. I know I'm kind of all over the place, but we got a lot of info today that was just without getting info. You can kind of like try to fill in the blanks for yourself, and that's kind of what I'm doing here. And I just wanted to bring some of this stuff up because I think a lot more people are going to be focused on the fight stuff, which is cool because we need that. Because I do think we're going to start seeing that big hole that King came through. I wouldn't be surprised if we seen some of the Scabbards just drop to the ground from that hole, or somebody catch them on the way down or something. Because we find out they all got clapped. This is one shot Kaido we're talking, or one clap Kaido, man. That's what I've been calling him. He's one clap Kaido because that's just what he does. Anyway, y'all let me know what you think. What did you find in the chapter appealing to you as far as what do you think's happening next in the story? Who do you think is fighting who? What do you think about some of the stuff that I was talking about, especially when it comes to Vegapunk and Momo specifically? Because another thing, we're going to get another world building chapter where we find out what's going on with the SSG, which, like I said, these things are starting to bring Vegapunk. And to me, at least, I know I could be wrong, but it just seems to me that things involving Vegapunk are coming into the fray really quickly, with these little tidbits without him even being mentioned, right? Just because of the connection to other characters that are coming to the fray. Like even we seen for once again Frankie. He was getting ready to he was getting ready to try to beam me up Scotty to Big Mom. I wouldn't have done anything, but it was still cool to see because Frankie, like I said, because he met Roger so young, all these Yonko and all these strong characters, Frankie has no celebrity, whatever you call that. Like it's famous people and powerful people. It doesn't mean anything to him. Like you think I care about you, man? I've seen the blueprints to Pluton, man. I've been in Vegapunk's lab. I know more than what you think. So you being Big Mom, it don't mean nothing to me. I can't clap you, but I'm still gonna talk tough because that's what I do, man. And, all the Straw Hats are riders except Chopper. Which that brings up the whole, once again, we're going back to Punk Hazard. Who was mad at Caesar for experimenting on the kids, which we assume is for giantification? Chopper. So it does make him even more relevant in a sense because he ties into this stuff too. So we gonna see, man. Um, anyway, like I said, let me know what you think. What did you see? What am I missing? What did you like? What didn't you like? And what do you think is going on next? Man, it was good talking to y'all again. I missed y'all, man. And I appreciate the, I don't want to say concerns, but the questions like, wait, how you been posting? Appreciate it. Well, now you know. And hopefully I'll talk to y'all soon. Enjoy this crazy day and whatever you're doing, stay safe and I'll catch you soon. I'm out.